Aloha kakahiaka kako. Welcome to the hearing on the House Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. Today is Friday, February 7th, and we are in room 325 at the Hawaii State Capitol, and this is the 9:30 a.m. hearing notice agenda. I am serving as chair of this committee, Kirsten Kahaloa, and today we have with us Vice Chair Representative Kush and Representative Peruso. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping rules. In order to allow as many people to testify as possible, there's a 2-minute time limit per testifier to allow us to have every testifier to have the opportunity to testify, since we do need to conclude our hearing before our noon floor session. Please keep yourself muted if you're joining us via Zoom and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is complete. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. Please use the chat only function for technical issues. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of a network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making only. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Please avoid using any trademark or copyright images, and also please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin. And on that note, we'd like to proceed with our agenda. First bill on the agenda today is HB 428 relating to Farm to Families. This bill establishes the Hawaii Farm to Families program to alleviate food shortages in the state, requires reports to the legislature prior to the regular session of 2026 and 2027, appropriates funds. First to testify on this measure is Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Cedric Gates here on behalf of the Department of Agriculture. The department stands on its strong support for this measure, as we know how important this is to feeding our families across Hawaii. We are here for any questions. Mahalo for allowing me to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Hunger Action Network here in person. Next, we have Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. We have Hawaii Farmers Union.
Chair, Hunter Heflin on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Union will stand on our written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have the Hawaii Food Bank.
Hi, aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, Rep. Peruso, members of the committee. My name's Amy Miller. I'm the president and CEO of Hawaii Food Bank, and we are very happy to be here today in strong support of this measure. If I may, I just want to share a little bit about why this is so important. So Hawaii Food Bank directly serves the islands of Oahu and Kauai. Through a network of about 225 partner agencies, we're able to get, last year, got almost 18 million meals into community through this network. Right now, we are serving about 170,000 people on average per month in those two islands. That's as many people as we are serving during the height of the COVID pandemic, and the numbers are continuing to tick up every single month. One of the things that we know is that produce, fresh foods tends to be one of the first things that falls off of people's grocery lists as times get tight. So people pivot towards less healthy food items. So this bill gives the opportunity for our community who can't afford local fresh foods to get access to that really good food that will have long-term impacts, positive impacts on health. Last year, we released the State of Food Insecurity in Hawaii report and found that 30% of Hawaii households are food insecure. 10% are going without food for whole days, some or most months of the year. On a regular basis, here in Hawaii, we have people going for whole days without eating. 6% of our kids are going for whole days without eating. It's a really critical issue. We're so grateful to this committee for considering this bill and are in very strong support. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Maui Food Bank via Zoom.
Aloha, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm Lisa Paulson with the Maui Food Bank, and I stand in strong support of this bill and stand by my written testimony with the addition of supporting all that Amy Miller has just said. And in Maui County, we serve on average 45,000 people a month. So this bill is very important to us and in providing fresh produce for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next to testify, we have Kaiser Permanente.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair Jonathan Ching for Kaiser Permanente. I apologize for our late testimony. Just stand on in strong support of this testimony, or in this strong support of this measure. Available for any questions.
Thank you. Hawaii Food Industry Association.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFA. We stand on our testimony and support. Again, we also apologize for the late testimony, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We received over 87 testimonies in support, but no one else indicating they wish to testify in person at this time. Would anyone else wish to testify in this measure? Anyone on Zoom? No. See none. Members, questions?
I have a quick question.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. For Amy from the food bank, I'm embarrassed to say that I have not participated in a food bank activity or, helping feed. Can you walk me through a little bit about what a weekday and a weekend operation might look like, just quickly?
Sure. So we run every day. There's maybe up to a dozen distributions happening across the islands. So it could vary. It could be a pantry in a church. It could be a large distribution where multiple families are coming. So for instance, we might do a distribution in partnership with an agency. They're responsible. They sign up the families. Families will show up at a given time. They can come and get food items that they need. Sometimes they can pick. Sometimes we have things already prepared for them. We've really been investing to try to get more cold storage out into our agencies. So if you, say, work during the week, don't have opportunity to access a weekday pantry or a weekday distribution, where oftentimes we have the trucks out so we can get fresh food right to folks. You can go to a pantry that has cold storage and get access to fresh foods like that. So that happens, again, dozens of times every single week, and it just depends. One of the things that I think is really amazing about this network is the food banks, really, our job is to provide the food, but it gets out into community through these partners, right? So it's churches, it's nonprofits, it's volunteers, people that just really care about each other that are in community getting food out to people. And happy to talk more.
Great. So you have a lot of flexibility in that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate you kind of painting that picture.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Since you're here, I will just ask a quick question as well. Can you enlighten us a little bit on other states that may state fund a program like this rather than ask for an avenue of maybe the nonprofit grant and aid process? Can you tell us a little bit more about what other states are doing to kind of provide maybe a more foundational funding support to food banks?
Sure. So this idea of funding, state funding for local food purchase is quite popular. We've just done some research, and I believe we have examples of at least 10 other states that are doing this, and it can vary. So every state has its own system. I think, gosh, up to millions of dollars in some of the larger states. And sometimes there's strict requirements on the kinds of farmers that can participate. So maybe have small farmers only. Others have pick and pack out programs. But I think it's a very common mechanism for states to both support families in need and to make sure those dollars are going back to support their local agricultural producers as well.
Perfect, thank you so much. Members, any further questions? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to the next measure. HB 967 relating to sustainable food systems establishes the statewide interagency food systems coordination team and the Interagency Food Systems Working Group within the Department of Agriculture, requires reports to the legislature, establishes positions, and appropriates funds. First to testify on this measure is Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Chair, the Department of Agriculture stands on its written comments, offering strong support for the intent of this measure. And thank you for introducing.
Thank you. Next, we have Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Good morning. Office of Planning and Sustainable Development stands on its testimony and strong support.
Thank you. Next, we have Agribusiness Development Corporation. Frankie.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Frankie Impeno. I'm here on behalf of the Agribusiness Development Corporation. ADC stands on its written testimony and support, and I would also like to note that we defer all decisions regarding funding for this working group to the Department of Agriculture, as stated in our testimony. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next, we have the Hawaii Food Bank. Thank you. Hawaii Farmers Union.
Hawaii Farmers Union will stand on our written testimony and strong support.
Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. And we have Hawaii Food Industry Association.
Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFIA. We're in support of this measure, and as the measure notes that the co-chairs are able to invite interested parties from outside organizations to participate, and we would be very happy to lend our expertise and be invited to participate when the group is formed. So, happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We had a lot of supportive testimony also on this measure, 13 in support, 2 organizations with comments. Would anyone else wish to testify on this measure? See none, members, questions? Do we have questions on this one?
I didn't see any.
Oh,
Here is the page.
okay. Okay. Seeing that we have no questions, we're going to move on to the next measure. HB 812, relating to agriculture, requires a contract for the purchase of local produce having a value of more than $250 to be for a term of at least 5 years. First to testify on this measure is Hawaii State Department of Education.
Stand on our testimony with providing comments.
Thank you. State Procurement Office via Zoom.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Bonnie Kahakoi, Administrator, State Procurement Office. Will stand on our written testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair. Hawaii's Farmers Union stands on our written testimony in support of the intent of this measure.
Thank you. Would anyone else wish to testify on HB 812? Members, questions?
Yes.
Yes, Representative Prusso.
I have a question for SPO. So, hi, thanks for being here. So I noticed in the Department of Education's testimony that they were concerned about the lack of flexibility of the shall language, right? So if we change shall to may in this measure to provide more flexibility, I understand, or I think the intent of this measure is to provide the stability of long-term contracts, which is actually an incentive for farmers to engage with our state agencies and departments. I understand the concern about lack of flexibility, but I'm wondering, because we've had these conversations over the years, do you think that if we make it more flexible, that will impact or support the work that's being done at the Department of Education? Just because my perception of the procurement work that's done under the School Food Services branch is separate and apart from the work that SPO does. So should this language be written into law, it will provide language that could provide guidance for the department, but I'm wondering if you feel like it will affect the Department of Education's actual efforts or work in this area. So there are a lot of questions all wrapped up in that question. Sorry.
Thanks for the question. So, by understanding, if you change it to May, I think that would not hamper DOE's efforts, because the DOE Chief Procurement Officer can make it more restrictive and say for certain products that their department shall make the contract for a specific number of years. I'm just concerned if you make it shall for statewide, that we're going to run into some problems.
I see. Okay, so that's very helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have a question for you as well for the State Procurement Office. Bonnie, I understand the price adjustment clause, but I wanted to ask a question about amending the value up to, let me make sure, how much was it? $100,000 from $250,000. That's a big adjustment. I understand it is a 5-year contract that we're looking at, but when we're looking at ensuring that all types of farmers and food producers could participate and benefit from this program, $100,000 might price out some of our small or medium-sized farms. So can you explain why you think we need to move that to $100,000, and if there's any support for an adjustment to somewhere more manageable in the middle? I understand that $250 is really small for a 5-year contract.
Yes, that was my major concern. If an agency, not DOE, needed to make a small purchase, a one-time purchase of produce, they're locked into this contract for 5 years. If we do want to lower the threshold, this is not on a per-year basis, though. So we're looking at, what would we be considering? 50,000 per year for 5 years? Or is it 100,000 per year for 5 years? So I wanted to make sure that it doesn't fall into this small purchase threshold, which is the value of the contract, not a per year value. So 100,000 shouldn't, so there's two things. It's the mandatory 5 years and 100,000. So basically, if you're doing it for 5 years, 100,000, that's only 20,000 a year. So are we saying that you're not going to be able to price out a small vendor? I would think would appreciate that higher amount, knowing that he's got a contract for 20,000 for 5 years, as opposed to, much smaller amount of, say, $500 over a 5-year period. That would not make a lot of economical sense. The economical burden, administrative burden for an agency to maintain a contract with such a small dollar value.
Understood, and I think that the Department of Education, if for this example, we're looking at the farm to school program for purchasing, we would hope that we would purchase more from a farmer for that extended period of time. But if that farmer only does have one commodity, we want to be flexible. We don't want the department to get stuck in parceling, which unless we move the other if we move the other measure and this measure, I see the $100,000 making sense, but right now, on the small purchasing level, the DOE still is stuck at that lower threshold, right? And I know we're dealing with that in another measure. But, you know, one thing from the USDA perspective is we looked up what a family or small farm definition looks like, again, to be equitable in this process. And the definition states, and I will read it word for word, USDA defines a farm as any place that produced and sold, or normally would have produced and sold, at least $1,000 of agricultural products during a given year. USDA uses acres of crops and head of livestock to determine if a place with sales of less than 100,000 could normally produce and sell at least that amount. So what my recommendation is, we adjust the threshold to $5,000. That would be the presumption, it would be $1,000 a year. Again, we want to give some flexibility as the department scales up, and the presumption is it might be able to meet that $1,000 threshold, but we want to give as many tools in the toolbox as possible. Is that an acceptable adjustment?
I think it is an acceptable adjustment if we change the language from shall to may.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Representative Peruso.
Department of Education, please. Mr. Kakasako, thank you for joining us. So my question for you folks is, you know I have a dream, right, about decentralizing and regionalizing farm to school. And I'm wondering if, you know, this measure combined with the next, if you think that there's a possibility of putting in place at least the procurement infrastructure or some of the necessary procurement infrastructure to decentralize this procurement down to the CAS level. Is that something the department is looking at? Or, because I know that, you know, some of our islands have resources that other islands do not, but they don't have enough of those resources to feed the whole state. So that's really like the thinking around regionalization, and are you folks doing work in that area so as to take advantage of this kind of legislation?
Yes, so short answer is yes. We are looking at decentralizing to a degree, but not all the way down to the CAS level. We're not wanting to put the burden of, with a lot of the requirements for USDA and making sure your meals are USDA reimbursable. It's very difficult for a CAS to be able to do all of that paperwork, so we're not wanting to go down to that level, but definitely looking at a regional level to see.
Doesn't the School Food Services branch have school production kitchen supervisors that are situated, you should have 12 or 13 of them that are situated at the CAS level, and aren't those folks equipped to do that kind of work?
They are equipped to do parts of that, but when it comes to all the paperwork and the menu planning and all that, we are working both at the state level and with those members to figure out our menus. But the CASs do have a lot already on their plate, and we're not.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't ask my CAS to do that.
Yes,
I'm saying
yes.
there's already a person who does that work, who's responsible for that work.
Correct. There are people that do that. So we are, like I said, we are looking at a regional method of doing this as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep.
You made my day.
Ken, just one more quick follow-up.
Sure.
Since we have you, we talked about the SPO's adjustments and proposed amendments, does that seem like an acceptable middle ground for an amendment to this measure with the $5,000 financial adjustment? There was the price adjustment clause so that if prices change, the contracts have that flexibility, as well as changing that shall to may, as Representative Peruso asked. How does that sound?
Sounds good. I think, yeah, sounds good.
Thank you, Ken.
Yep.
Members, any further questions?
If I may.
Yes, Vice Chair.
Thank you for the opportunity. Hunter from Farmers Union. Question for you, sir. You know, we're talking about the dollar amount mostly and focusing on that, and understanding from the DOE and the procurement, but from the farmer standpoint, representing small farmers, what's your feeling on the timeline of locking into a 5-year contract Is there a better term? Is that a sweet spot? Any thoughts?
Thank you for the question, Vice Chair. Hunter Havlin on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Union. I think that the 250 threshold feels exceedingly low for the flexibility that would be pursued by any procurement officer, or just imagining the volume of purchasing at $250
Yeah,
that would be
understood.
required. So from a smallholder perspective, I think that threshold that was discussed, $5,000, seems quite reasonable. I was discussing with my peer in the back, our peanut gallery in the back here, about the interpretation and whether that 250 or 5,000 is per annum or over the duration of a 5-year contract. And it seems like the belief is maybe it's the latter. So setting that $1,000 threshold, I think even if it were slightly higher, that would be acceptable. I mean, running with the bare minimum of the USDA's analysis of a smallholder operation is great. I think I would say we certainly feel included with the threshold as amended. So.
Okay, what about the timeline? Is there like that 5-year timeline? I'm just thinking about, depending on the crop, since there's, sometimes in agriculture, I feel like we have a certain picture in our heads.
Sure, in terms of
what's going to be included, but you may go from
I would
beef
say,
to sheep to, you know, there could be changes in your crops.
I think the department hopefully can get some support to do further communication around the types and volumes of goods that are being purchased or that could be purchased locally. Those market signals would probably have a lag in terms of ensuring that the full volume could, or if not already produced locally, could be produced locally. And certainly there are hurdles in terms of cost to meet the reimbursements that are currently available. That being said, there is a federation of regional aggregators that is already in operation across the state through the Hawaii Food Hub Hui, which is a project of the Hawaii Good Food Alliance, that already does aggregate from a variety of smallholders. And I believe, should these regional efforts be part of the pathway that we pursue going forward, can be a strong resource to help the DOE meet these mandates.
Okay, thank you.
And Hunter, just to clarify, I think the intention is that new threshold is the baseline to approval to qualify for a long-term contract. So whether it was 5,000 to 500,000, 5 million, that's just the base threshold for the allowability. So yeah, I think it covers a lot.
Certainly covers most every producer in the state, so, yeah.
Thank you, Hunter. Members, any further questions? Seeing none, we're gonna move on to the next measure. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. HB 1187. Let me turn my page to there. Oh, here we go. Thank you. Relating procurement phases in a ban on state departments administratively attached and agencies for purchasing imported flowers and leis. And we have a couple testifiers. State Procurement Office on Zoom.
Good morning again, Chair, Vice Chairs, members of the committee, Bonnie Kalkoi. We stand on our written testimony, just providing comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Farm Bureau in person.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Representative Peruso, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony in support. We did provide some comments. Again, we are in support of this. We should be using locally produced, locally grown flowers and other plant products. We did have some concern that whether or not tea leaf or kukui is included, but reading the bill again, it appears those are included. We want to just make sure that we are providing the resource and support for our flower growers to help them increase production so that there is a supply, because the last thing we want is no lei or no flower arrangement. So again, other policies that are being pushed forward to support agriculture, we need to consider. Again, making sure that we have access to affordable land, affordable water, addressing labor issues, biosecurity, not for this one, but food safety for other products. And so again, we need to make sure that the farmers have the ability to scale up so that we aren't importing so much flowers, especially for lei. But also we need to consider making sure that the flowers and the plant products that we are using are affordable. Right? Again, it needs to be about economics also, and that's why we're importing so much, because of the cost of production for our local flowers and plant products for these particular things that we're talking about. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, member of the committee. Hunter Evelyn on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Union. We'll stand in strong support of this measure. We view it as being an accompaniment to recent efforts across the state that have been seeking to support lake flower growers. And as the longtime agricultural policy analysts, the Wu-Tang Clan, had put it, you must protect your neck. And if there is to be a way, let it be a local lay. Thank you.
Okay, that was
Wow,
a
drop the mic.
beautiful conclusion to our testimony. Is there any other testifiers in person or on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Chair, committee
Members,
members, any questions? None for me. We'll be moving on to HB 110 HD1. Can I borrow your- Relating to local agricultural products, modify certain benchmark goals and timeline for the Department of Education to provide locally sourced agriculture and food products. Currently effective July 1, 3000. Okay, so first to testify in person, we have the Hawaii Department of Education. Thank you. And next, Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Morning, Chair. The Department of Agriculture stands on its written testimony offering support.
And then Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair. We'll stand on our written testimony and support.
Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
All right, and Hawaii Public Health Institute. No Hawaii Public Health Institute? Okay. That's all our testifiers. Is there any other testifiers who'd like to discuss this measure or make comment on Zoom? Nope, seeing none. Any questions? Representative Russo, please.
I have a question for the Farmers Union. First of all, you didn't finish your testimony.
I didn't
Second.
finish my testimony. It was the only one that I had to submit, so my apologies.
No, but I wanted to ask you about your testimony because it raised good points. And you mentioned the concerns about the language shift from produce to food, and having just finished looking at the definition of local food in House Bill 812, I think that, to me, is a pretty solid definition that we could be working with. And I think your concern is that we would be able to kind of game the system, or departments. Departments would never do that, but, you know, they might accidentally game the system by using things that are only half from Hawaii and then comboed with something else to provide an appearance of locally sourcing.
We certainly wouldn't believe a department would willfully do so, but market actors, I believe, once the definition has been broadened to incorporate processing costs, and then the measurement has shifted from product to total cost, means that you could decrease the volume of local products that you incorporate, increase the costs of your processing, and amend with imported goods, and still be progressing us towards this benchmark without actually making the primary progress that we were pursuing. So, for example, if you had consolidated your holdings across meat processing in the state, decrease the cost you paid for head, increase the cost you charge for processing, that increased cost would then be marked by, say, our Department of Education, should it be tallying local purchase, as progress, when in actuality, ranchers could be receiving less per pound, and the actual volume of local goods that are making it into our schools could be decreased. So it's a significant concern. I believe a bill in previous years we had introduced that was focused on single ingredient products to try and clarify that when we are seeking to make progress towards these goals, that we can be certain that the progress we are making is true. And we can be certain that the benefits that accrue from that progress are our rural farms and families.
So, I mean, I think that we are doing more work around value-added processing. And I think there's been more attention to state investment in processing, meat processing, and other kinds of processing. But I'm wondering if, how to, I guess I'm curious about the language that would help us clean this up and create stronger guardrails against that kind of possibility, because our outcomes to be authentically moving us in the direction of food sovereignty. And so, we've seen in other cases where, macadamias, for example, or coffee, we have all these spaces in which the processing piece allows a lot of importation and to kind of create a false sense of Hawai'i production. So maybe it's not this measure, maybe it's another measure, maybe we come back to it next year, but is there a way that you think this bill could be amended to strengthen the guardrails?
Well, in the absence of a complete testimony, it's possible that whatever was cut off from mine had all of those answers perfectly laid out. I guess that it wasn't quite the case. But we'd be happy to work with this committee to review some of those previous bills and provide updated language. That being said, I want to highlight that we support the processing industry. Right? It is not intending to malign. It is a critical component of our food system across the state. However, the goals as written really shift and modify who benefits from the pursuit of these goals. And when we only count calories and volumes, not livelihoods and who benefits, we risk shifting these subsidies and shifting the benefit of state market power to not those who have long already, I don't want to say suffered, but not benefited from the largesse of backing from the state, but have pursued under their own will and determination. And we view this as a critical opportunity for state market power to support the diversity of producers at various sizes across the state.
Thank you. I defer to the chair. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. That was a great explanation. We'll be moving. Is there any other testifiers on this? Okay, just wanted to make sure nobody else had additional comments. We're moving on to HB 328 HD1 relating to school meals. Requires the Department of Education to authorize and facilitate complex areas or individual public schools to form their own farm-to-school meal programs through partnerships to meet the local farm-to-school meal goal of 30% of food served in a school to consist of locally sourced products by 2030. Allows the Department of Education to establish a plant-based meal program no later than the 26-27 school year. And we had 64 in support here, 0 in opposition with 2 comments. The first to testify in person is State Department of Education. Thank you. Next, we have a Hawaii Farmers Union.
Chair, we'll send a written testimony in support.
Thank you. Next, we have the Hawaii State Teachers Association in person. On Zoom? Nobody? Okay. Hawaii Public Health Institute. Must have sent out the wrong room. Greenpeace Hawaii. On Zoom?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Good morning. Dave Malnex. Thank you, Chair Kahaloa, for hearing this important legislation. My name is Dave Malnex, co-founder of Greenpeace Hawaii. On behalf of our thousands of members of supporters statewide, we stand in strong support of HB 328. I became a vegetarian back in high school, and there was nothing for me to eat when I was in for school lunch. That was 60 years ago. In that time, we landed on the moon. We all have computers in our homes, and everyone's walking around with a Star Trek communicator cell phone. And still, here in Hawaii, vegan and vegetarian students can't get a plant-based meal. And they have testified at the legislature that they are going hungry because there's nothing for them to eat in their school lunch. The target for the Department of Education is 30% food served in public schools to consist of locally produced products. DOE said they can't meet the 30% goal because they can't meet the protein component of the meal if it is locally sourced, and that seems a bit not correct. The healthy plate in school lunch consists protein is only 25% of the plate. Fruits and vegetables are supposed to be 50% of the plate, which we have plenty of those here in Hawaii. Whole grains can include ulu and sweet potato, also plenty here in Hawaii. Farmers said, just tell us what you want us to grow and we'll grow it for you. The DOE's excuse, so it's equivalent to, say, the dog eating my homework. It's past time for our vegan and vegetarian students to be able to have a plant-based meal. Please pass this important legislation and don't let these kids go hungry anymore. Thank you so much for hearing this legislation.
Thank you. Okay, our next testifier is Layla Wright, individual on Zoom.
Aloha, Chair Kahaloa and Vice Chair Kush and members of the committee. My name is Leela, and I am testifying in favor of the bill HB 328 HD1. The reason I am in support of this bill is because I have personally witnessed the transformation that takes place when you educate children on healthy food choices and introduce them to growing their own. My mother taught children how to garden in urban environments where natural spaces were very limited. And in the past few years, I taught herbalism classes to middle school children in Hilo. This hands-on approach opened the minds of our youth and put them more in touch with where our food comes from and how much work goes into caring for the land. Ultimately, their interest and appreciation for healthy food grew. And currently, Hawaii imports approximately 90% of its food, and supporting local farmers with programs like Aina Pono will boost our local economy and the overall health of our keiki. The bill clearly states that Aina Pono has already been proven to be a success in school districts like Kohala and Mililani. So we have evidence that providing more farmers school programs will be beneficial. In closing, my support of HB 328 HD1 is rooted in the belief that it will help reach the goal that at least 30% of school meals will be locally sourced by Hawaii's own farmers. Mahalo nui.
Thank you for your testimony. That concludes our testimony. Is there any others that would like to testify on this bill? Seeing none, Chair, members, any questions? Okay, moving on to HB 497 HD1, relating to the Hawaii Child Nutrition Programs, transfers the Hawaii Child Nutrition Programs Agency from the Department of Education to the Department of Agriculture and codifies its establishment. Establishes a grant program to be administered by the agency to support the funding of certain initiatives for the state's public schools. Appropriates funds for grants. Okay, first in testimony, we have Hawaii State Department of Education. Good morning, Chair, members. Brian Allen from the Department of Education. The department stands on certain testimony comments. Okay, thank you. Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Aloha, Chair. The Department of Agriculture stands on its written comments. Here for any questions.
Thank you. And then Hawaii Farmers Union and Support in person.
Written testimony and support.
Copy that. Hawaii Public Health Institute in support in person. Almost in person. Okay, there's no other testifiers in person. Would anybody else like to speak on this bill? Anybody on Zoom? We had 10 in support, 0 in opposition, 2 comments by the 2 departments. Any questions, committee and chair?
Yes, I have a question. I have a
Okay.
comment.
Yes, please.
Sorry, for the Department of Education. Hi.
Morning.
So I guess I'm just confused because it's my understanding that HCMP provides oversight of the school food services branch from the federal perspective. Is that an accurate understanding?
Oversight and technical assistance, yes.
Yes, okay. It's not been lost on anybody that over the past few years, there hasn't been really positive interaction or engagement or like a mutually beneficial relationship between School Food Services Branch and HCNP so that technical assistance and support, I'm thinking back to maybe a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, a story in Civil Beat about federal funds being lost because of a disagreement about how, or not being able to be expended because the department disagreed with how HCMP was moving forward with federal funds, something to that effect. So, I mean, I think that there are already issues around the extent to which their support is welcomed and support and kind of I guess the best word is welcomed by School Food Services Branch. So that piece I wanted to kind of put to the side. I am most concerned about the oversight piece. And it seems to me, I mean, just structurally, that structurally inconsistent to have the body that is supposed to provide oversight of a particular branch located within the same department and subject to the same leadership of that department. So I'm wondering, I mean, I read your testimony, but how would you address my concerns? I don't think your testimony really addresses my concerns directly.
I think to the first point, the past, which is the past.
Yeah.
I don't know that this change would have made a difference one way or the other,
Mm-hmm.
to move it to another department. And I would also suggest that there are a number of areas of accountability within the department that exist within the current structure. So I don't think it's inherently impossible to have accountability all within one department.
I just feel like this is one particular area in which the department is really struggling alongside transportation. And I just wonder about, I see this as a legitimate effort to strengthen oversight and to separate powers or separate that oversight and move it away from being under the control of the very person they're supposed to provide oversight of. So I recognize that it's possible, right? But I do think there's a logical problem, for me anyway. So I was just wondering if you could address that in ways that were not already covered in your testimony. But
I guess I would add that there is regular communication between the Child Nutrition Program and the Western Regional Office with the federal Western Regional Offices. The program has tools at its disposal to enforce or require compliance, and they exercise those. So I think there is a history. It hasn't been a perfect history, but there is a mechanism that exists. Other than that, nothing more to add than what's in the testimony.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we are going to move, and I just wanted to point out there was support 10, 0 in opposition, and 2 comments. Moving on to HB 773. Relating to agriculture, appropriates funds for grant specialist positions to assist farmers and ranchers in meeting the requirements to receive grants offered by the United States Department of Agriculture, state, counties, and private entities. Okay. So we have the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Well, Chair, the Department of Agriculture supports this measure and stands on the measure. Comments?
Thank you. Ulupono Initiative.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Rep. Russo. Mariah Yoshizu on behalf of Ulupono Initiative. Based on a preliminary search of our fiscal year 25 federal funding opportunities, the HDOA has identified more than $22 million in potential awards. This, along with the $6 million that they currently manage on a recurring year-to-year basis, totals almost $30 million that we can bring into our state. Without this additional capacity for grant specialists, we risk leaving millions in federal dollars on the table. Investing in these positions can yield a high return on investment and bring long-term benefits and as we look to uplift our farmers and ranchers. Thank you so much for hearing this.
Thank you. Hawaii Farm Bureau?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chair, Representative Peruso, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have a written testimony in support. It was going to stand in support, but just wanted to emphasize how critical this need is with the new administration, with the potential reduction in funds to philanthropic or other types of grants. So we really need to grab what's available out there and maximize those federal dollars to support our agricultural sector here in Hawaii. My understanding is the current grant specialist right now is doing an amazing job. And so this bill, I believe, suggests positions. So not just one, we need more positions. We need more people, professionals bringing in those outside dollars into Hawaii. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, 100%. Hawaii Farmers Union. Oh. Okay, Local Food Coalition on Zoom.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, Representative Peruso Myong'o, on behalf of the Local Food Coalition and strong support. As evidenced by Ulupono's great testimony, grant writers are essential tools. They serve as a catalyst in assisting local farmers and ranchers to pursue these federal funding opportunities. Ultimately, it's driving the monies down from the federal government, multiplier effect to Hawaii's agricultural economy. So we ask for your strong support and thank you very much.
Thank you. That's the end of our Zoom and in-person testimony. Would anybody else like to testify on this measure? Committee, Chair, any questions? Okay, I have a question for Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Cedric Gates for the Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. Just quick question was, what was like a dollar value you could offer for the two positions you think are required for this grant program?
I believe that would be something that our subject matter expert would have an answer for you on that. I can get back to you with that via email or follow up after that. But I'm hearing from Hawaii Farm Bureau 100,000.
Is that, just to clarify, is that each position or for the two positions? Thank you. There we go. We have an answer.
So it's 200K?
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
No
that.
problem.
Okay. Thank you. And we're going to be moving on just a second here. I just wanted to report that for those listening in, we had 8, for 773, we had 8 in support, 0 in opposition, and 0 in comments. So moving on to HB 776, relating to agricultural support, establishes within the Department of Agriculture the Hawaii Agricultural Transportation Assistance Program to consist of a reimbursement program and a grant program to assist certain farmers and livestock producers with transportation costs for agricultural producers, input, supplies, and production and distribution of agricultural commodities. Requires reports to the legislature. Okay. So we have 10 in support on this, 0 in opposition with 1 comment, and our first to testify in person is Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chair, Representative Peruso, Brian Miyamoto here on behalf of the Hawaii Farm Bureau. You have our written testimony in support. We absolutely support this based off of the USDA's program. We do want to highlight, we do highlight it in our testimony. Again, transportation costs affect our farmers and ranchers, but there's an additional impact to our neighbor island farmers and ranchers. So in the past, we've come forward with kind of focusing on additional resources for our neighbor island farmers and ranchers who, if a lot of the inputs that come in to Honolulu, they ship it over to the neighbor island, so that additional costs of transportation. And if their market is here on Oahu, they have to ship it back, so they have an additional cost. So we also want to be mindful on our neighbor islands and sometimes the unfair competitive advantage that our Oahu farmers have over neighbor islands. We did want to note that we didn't see a cap in the grant program. We saw the $8,000 cap in the reimbursement program, so I'm not sure if that's going to be worked out through Department of Agriculture. And also, we didn't see any appropriation. There's no section for an appropriation, so I don't know if it's just establishing the special fund and then coming back next year for an appropriation, but we'd like to see the appropriation into the special fund so that we can start implementing these two programs immediately. Again, transportation costs is something that drives up the cost of production, which ultimately results in higher costs to our consumers here for local food, feed, fiber, fuel, and floriculture from agriculture. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next testifier, we have Hawaii Farmers Union. This is on HB 776, so that we stay on the right.
Thank you, Vice Chair, Chair, Committee Member. Hawaii Farmers Union stands on its written testimony and support and seeks amendment to include food hubs, which, as prior discussed, are a critical mechanism for particularly smallholder operations, but really farms of all sizes, to access markets. We believe that particularly for small entities that may not be already engaged in inter-island transportation, that food hubs often perform that service for them. So we would recommend the inclusion of food hubs and maybe some equitable distribution of volume to private or individual farm operations and food hubs as a distributor type.
Great, thank you. On Zoom, we have Watanabe Floral. Not present. Okay, and next we have on Zoom Hawaii Food Industry Association. Oh, okay, that's right. Thank you. There's no other testifiers. Would anybody else like to testify? Oh, there we go. Chamber of Commerce.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Apologies. Our testimony did get submitted late, but we'll double check to make sure it got received. We'll stand on a written testimony and support. We recently launched a 2030 Blueprint for Hawaii, which is an economic action plan that was done through an independent study. And one of the areas of opportunities to build a much more sustainable economy is to support 21st century ag. And sorry, this is Sherry Minoru with the Chamber of Commerce. As Brian from Hawaii Farm Bureau mentioned, the neighbor islands do have a disadvantage due to the transportation costs. So we believe that this bill will definitely support our local farmers on the neighbor islands and help address economic growth as well as sustainability. So on that note, we stand on our written testimony and support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha, Chair, Cedric Gates from the Department of Agriculture. I believe we submitted testimony on this measure. We are going to stand on that testimony in support. Here for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other testifiers? I'm sorry we didn't have you listed in person, Cedric. Any other testifiers? Questions? Chair? Committee?
Quick question for the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. Hi,
Aloha.
Sherry.
Hi.
Just checking on to the Hawaii Farm Bureau's testimony, and we were trying to ensure, and Farmers Union, on equitability of funding, and a lot of testimony came in from the neighbor islands. We were looking at how to define kind of support for rural communities, and what I'm hearing in testimony today, and that kind of illuminated in written testimony, is that maybe as we're building this, we should start with neighbor island only and define this to reducing transportation costs and burdens starting on all the neighbor islands versus making it a statewide program. So I just wanted to see what you thought about that, because that is an adjustment, but it just came up in some of the testimony that maybe that's one way. We don't have a price cap on it either, so maybe that's one way to start this kind of program. So I wanted to know what the intentions were to do that.
Well, personally, from someone who is from the neighbor island, from your island, can certainly recognize some of the disadvantages and the additional burden for our local businesses, including farmers. And so I think it's a good starting point because transportation is a huge factor in the overall cost of doing business. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you. Hawaii Farm Bureau?
Brian Miyamoto on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Bureau Union of Agriculture. Brian Miyamoto, Hawaii Farm Bureau. Thank you, Vice Chair. I just wanted to comment on that question. Maybe because this is a two-part program, or there's two programs within the bill, maybe the reimbursement program could be for all producers statewide. Again, we don't want to leave out our Oahu producers, and that's not the point that we're trying to make. And then start the grant program as a pilot program focusing on our neighbor island and rural communities. We do have rural communities here on Oahu, but maybe we'll go and say the grant program is going to be a neighbor island agriculture reimbursement, or not reimbursement, transportation grant program. And then we'll go from there and kind of see what those outcomes are, see what those needs are also. Again, we do acknowledge, as in our testimony, our written testimony says, our neighbor islands, farmers and ranchers in somewhat of a disadvantage. Not only the additional transportation costs, but I failed to mention a lot of times the fuel costs for their vehicles, for their trucks, are higher on the neighbor islands also. So yes, if we could maybe focus with the grant program, that might be a solution that the legislature would consider. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comments.
Thank you. Anybody else that I can trash their organization's name? No, anybody else would like to testify? Any other questions from committee? I have some questions on this one. So, and listening to testimony today, let's see, is Department of Agriculture, please?
Vice Chair Kush, Chair Kahaloa, and Rep. Peruso, Matthew Loke, Department of Ag.
Thank you, sir. My question is, so do you have like I felt like this bill is kind of loosely defined. I get it. And listening today now, it sounds like it's more shaped towards helping inter-island, bridge the inter-island shipping fees. But the way it's written, as I understood this, it's pretty broad. It doesn't have a lot of definitions that would, kind of keep it tight. There's a lot of room to move around in it. And is there any, like a threshold that would qualify a disadvantaged farmer? I guess on page 4, they give a definition. Let's see. These are from my notes. Okay, a geographically disadvantaged farmer or livestock producer means a farmer or livestock producer located operating in the state or incurs a blank amount of costs due to their geographical location. And I paraphrased a little bit. You can kind of understand that's a pretty ambiguous word salad. So I'm just wondering if you have any ideas how to tighten that up to define that?
Yes, I believe that the definition was adopted from USDA way back in 2005. That was to facilitate the so-called disbursement of transportation fees to disadvantaged areas, particularly for Hawaii, Guam, Western Samoa, and Puerto Rico. So there was a federal thing, and I think we are trying to expand it to the state level now.
Okay, so it was primarily to do with shipping.
Right. And I think shipping is really important, and in particular agriculture producers, because we in Hawaii, we are all consumers. We all have to pay for transportation costs, whether we like it or not. But for agricultural producers, for farmers and livestock, they have a so-called double payment. One, they have to pay for their input costs, because a lot of input costs like fertilizer all comes from somewhere else. And secondly, to get their products to market, they have also to pay for the shipping costs. So they're getting double payment for that. So that's why this bill is important, that we make sure that they are able to thrive in their businesses and that they get a so-called relief for some of the higher costs.
Sure, evening out the playing field. So would maybe a better definition be tightening it up to shipping costs versus, because right now sounds like just driving from Kau to Hilo could include your truck's amortization, fuel, maintenance costs, insurance, like it's pretty open what it could mean.
Right. I'm thinking because right now, to qualify for a program interstate, we need, and to come up with a rate, we also need to qualify how much of agricultural products are shipped from one island to another. And at this point in time, I think there's a weakness in our system. We need to have better data to be able to track what ag products stay on the same island and what volume and dollar value are exported to neighbor islands and beyond.
Okay, well, good news, there's a bill to address that coming up.
Thank you.
Stay tuned.
Thank you. And Vice Chair, I think because of the realization that USDA has a definition, maybe we can strengthen the language. But maybe Hawaii Farmers Union has a comment. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you, Chairs Committee. I would offer, so some of the word salad I think I may have had a hand in. Part of this is designed to try and support or reinforce already existing effort at the USDA, and by providing additional support. I think we as a sector appreciate the breadth of coverage that it affords because of the particularly high costs the Department of Agriculture highlighted. If reporting or other approaches are viewed as necessary, I think looking to that existing USDA program and having similar reporting requirements, maybe even exactly similar reporting requirements, could ensure both that users of the USDA program can easily access this one, and anyone who is unaware of the USDA but participates in this program could readily participate in that additional subsidy. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Chair? Okay. Moving on, we are going to HB 782. Relating to agriculture, establishes within the Department of Agriculture a working group to review and make recommendations on amending or repealing unnecessary or obsolete laws pertaining to agriculture. And we have 4 in support, 0 in opposition, and 1 agency comment. Hawaii Farm Bureau in person.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Hawaii Farmers Union in person.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Because we can imagine no greater act than combing through legislative and administrative law, we would like to formally request for Hawaii Farmers Union to join this effort, but also to highlight the necessity that this not be just a slash and burn effort, right? So the approaches have been pursued in jurisdictions and even statewide on the mainland that have used a take called zero-based regulation that seeks to eliminate all regulatory function, or set caps in some cases on even the amount of verbiage allowed within legislation. And as I've said in previous testimony elsewhere, as the department has regularly avowed itself to be a regulatory agency, we fear that it would be left with nothing to do. But we, again, would like to seek participation in this working group. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to testify on this measure? Please, Department of Agriculture.
Chair, I believe the department submitted testimony with comments on this measure, and we're here for any questions.
Okay. Got it. All righty. Anybody else like to submit testimony? Seeing none, we're going to move on to, oh, I'm sorry, questions.
I have a question for the Department of Ag.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I echo Hunter's concerns, and I'm wondering if the department has already started to talk about, the regulations that protect, I would say, public health and safety around the agricultural space, and then also kind of, I'll share with you my district's context. We have regulations and laws, but they are not adequately enforced sometimes. And so then there's a lot of community upset and also some damage to the community. And then my worry is that if we are creating a working group to create zero-based regulation, is that the approach that's being taken here from your understanding, or is it a more, scalpel-like approach?
Earl Yamamoto, Department of Agriculture. I have absolutely no idea, but I can speculate. This seems to me more targeted. If you look at the three examples of possible obsolete or unnecessary things that we do. Restrictions on leases of state agricultural land that prohibit a residence on the property. Number two, restrictions on leases of state agricultural land that prohibit
I got it. I mean, I see it. I see it, but, and I understand that's the focus, but, and I guess I should go back and talk to the author, the introducer of the bill, but I am concerned about broad application, and in the language of the bill, it doesn't say that it'll be restricted specifically and only to these topics. So that's my concern. So I guess it's a issue for further conversation, but I was wondering what the department's analysis of the bill was. So if you don't really know, then that's also fine.
Yeah, it's all a matter of definition up front.
Yeah.
And this working group, 11 members, without any clear definitions. If it's left up to the working group, kind of depending on its composition,
Yeah.
it can turn out to be a witch hunt.
Yeah.
All kinds of bad stuff can come out.
Yeah,
Maybe some good. And that's why we're, in testimony, we're recommending instead of this working group, a commission, the legislature commission a study by a neutral party to undertake, to get the data, to look at things.
I saw that, and I don't know what the chair will decide to do, but thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Any other further questions? Okay. Moving on to HB 968. Relating to agriculture, requires the Department of Agriculture to establish a healthy soils program, requires an annual report to the legislature and appropriate funds. We had 45 in support of this measure, 0 in opposition, and 1 comment, starting with the Department of Agriculture in person.
Morning, Chair. The Department of Agriculture stands on its written comments, supporting the
Thank you. And next, we have Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair. Hawaii Farmers Union stands on our written testimony in strong support of this measure. We have advocated for this measure or one very similar to it for the past handful of years, and view this as a critical opportunity for the Department of Agriculture to coalesce existing programs under one roof. So currently we have a permanent compost reimbursement program. We have successfully passed a cover crop pilot program. There's a measure later in this hearing that would actually create a temporary pilot for agriculture and climate resilience, I believe. And we view a variety of conservation agricultural practices as being a key opportunity for the department to route resources to support producers to pursue good land management, and to subsidize those decisions to internalize environmental costs. For those reasons, we hope that we see this measure move forward, though the ADC, now that they're no longer here to defend themselves, could be another opportunity to put this measure and house it somewhere else. In previous hearing on the Senate side, they had expressed openness to this and the reticence on the part of the department over a number of years. Despite there being FTEs or additional funding put in, I highlight as a concern and hopefully not one that would keep this measure from moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Hawaii Farm Bureau?
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
All righty. That is all I have for our in-person. Is there any Zoom testimony? Anybody else would like to testify on this? Questions? Sure. Otherwise, I will.
Vice Chair.
If you're reticent.
Vice Chair.
If you're reticent. Okay, my question is for the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, sorry, Hunter.
Sorry, Hunter. I was just using your word. That was good.
Yield back.
It's a good word. Thank you. You know, this bill, the intent, I get it. It's a great bill, as Hawaii Farmers Union pointed out, but it also seemed, again, kind of an ambiguous in areas. And not being a soil scientist, you know, forgive me if I'm not seeing the details, but like, is there definitions to define an unhealthy soil and then compensate someone to bringing it to a defined healthy state?
There were a number of early Yamamoto Department of Agriculture. There were a number of attempts, not specific to this bill, but related to looking at determining a baseline of sequestered carbon, something desirable, what is possible, how much it would cost. But those efforts, those separate efforts, when I guess when the grant funding ran out, the work came to a stop. There's the one institution that, or maybe two, one at Office of Planning that may be kind of moribund. Section 225P4, the Greenhouse Gas Sequestration Task Force, I believe, is one, and the Department of Land and Natural Resources, I think, has that. There's a pilot program. I think funding expires this year. Leah Laramie, she probably can respond to it too. But the responsibilities are kind of similar in terms of looking at what the goal is. Maybe the approach is a little bit different. This one over here, I've looked at this repeatedly over I don't know 5 years already. You know, different proponents, same language, and they throw in some money and all of this. But the devil's in the details, and without the definitions and all these the numbers that need to be generated in order for a program to stand to be stood up, that these things need to exist first before we get, you know, fancy and start offering farmers, you know, cost reimbursements and other things.
Okay, yeah, that was my take, and kind of part two of that question on page 2, lines 7 through 9. There's how would you structure and issue awards to farmers who are building? Let's say we got those definitions from those other groups you were just saying. How would you structure awards to a farmer? Like, what would that look like? There's this section here. It says, subject to available funding, issue awards and other financial incentives to implement farm management practices that contribute to healthy soils. And I'm just trying to get a picture of what that might look like from an administrative standpoint.
Yeah, I never got that far in the analysis. I see where we addressed it in testimony, but I was just caught up with what has to exist first before we get to that point. So I didn't get. I have no idea what that administrative burden, no doubt a burden, would be like. I have no idea.
Okay, thank you. Did you have an idea?
You call the testifier.
Yeah,
Hawaii
Farmers Union. Thank you.
Sure. So Hunter Hevlin on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Union. This bill is structured in a similar way to California's Healthy Soils program and also a variety of programs nationally at the state level. So the awards language is focused on existing subsidies and programs to facilitate the adoption of conservation agricultural practices. When I say those words, they're intentional. The Natural Resource Conservation Service of the USDA has already outlined in its field office technical guide for Pacific Islands areas a variety of practices, in some ways already assessed based off of greenhouse gas emissions benefits, as well as previous study by the Greenhouse Gas Sequestration Task Force and other entities that I believe much of this information is readily available. That being said, if creating a statewide soil health assessment is beyond the pale, and I do believe it would require resources and conceivably expertise that the department does not apparently have in-house. Striking that from this and focusing instead on the distribution of grants, awards, et cetera, and the pursuit of additional funding to support that type of distribution, I think would be a reasonable effort. It's one that numerous other states, and so many that we've already organized ourselves into a national healthy soil policy network, have been pursuing for quite some time. And so I believe it to be well housed within the department, and it is an opportunity for the department to bring together existing programs, and that's where the award language comes, right? So take the compost program, which currently has moved year over year to different ports within the Department of Agriculture. And as a result, I believe has frustrated participation by producers who, depending on the year, may have had to go figure out for themselves who was a certified compost operation. So in this previous year, as it moved to yet another part of the DOA, I had furnished the department with a list of certified compost programs, but that did not make it onto their website. So this left producers who were seeking to participate in the program without any understanding of where to go. An additional issue with that effort is that that subsidy has now been, we could say, again, this gets to the point from earlier about who benefits from these. As a result of that subsidy, Hawaiian Earth Products has doubled its cost. And so without a program that is specifically focused on these, what we have seen is a subsidy that was supposed to support farmers has now gone to a processor yet again. And so we believe that having an entity or a department, a place for these efforts to live, is of critical importance to ensuring that the benefits that this body believes farmers should have are actually getting to them.
Start upon them. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions?
May I ask a question?
Please. Sure.
Hunter, please, or Hawaii Farmers Union.
Hunter Farmers Union here, yes.
Question about one of your previous statements about this bill being heard in the Senate and a conversation about where this program should be placed. And you did indicate that it should be the Department of Agriculture, but can you speak a little bit about other potential alternatives, whether that is through the ADC, or would this be something better served in CTAR? I'm not sure.
As currently set up, the subsidy programs for these types of practices are mostly within the Department of Agriculture, right? So the compost reimbursement program is within the Department of Agriculture. The cover crop pilot program, which I don't know has ever made it out of administrative rule development, is also within the Department of Agriculture. DLNR has its own approach that's a carbon smart land management program that is shifted over years to try and understand who it's trying to serve. Originally, it was focused on larger landowners, and when actually this bill was first introduced, that program was also being developed at the same time, and we tried to kind of coalesce, but opinions differed on how to go about it. So we have two efforts, right? But in practice, we view this as being important to put in the language that producers use, in language that benefits them. And so a healthy soils program living within the department gives, I believe, the department an opportunity to signal to producers, we can be a resource for you, not just a regulatory, but lambasting, as many may experience it. That being said, ADC did express support and does seem to be taking a dogged approach to pursuing a variety of programs to support the industry. That may shift over time as leadership and oversight does. So while we support whoever wants to take it, I think wherever it does live should bring these existing programs with it. Right? So move the compost reimbursement program, the funding, the resources that go to that, to wherever this program ends up.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, with no further questions, we're going to move on to HB 984 relating to agricultural loans. Updates the agricultural loan program by lowering interest rates, increasing and standardizing loan limits, and reducing the number of credit denials. Authorizes the agricultural loan program to issue lines of credit. Creates a new class of loans to encourage large-scale agriculture of import replacement crops grown for the farm to state program. Appropriates funds. All righty. We had 7 in support, 0 in opposition, and 1 comment. First to comment in person is Department of Agriculture.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Cedric Gates here on behalf of the Department of Agriculture. The department stands on its written testimony in strong support of this measure. The department would like to note that this measure is very important to assisting our local farmers with getting capital. We will be here for any questions. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next in person, we have Ulupono Initiative. Thank you. Next, we have Hawaii Farm Bureau in person.
Thank you, Vice Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau is down on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. And next, we have Hawaii Farmers Union in person.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Hunter Havlin on behalf of Hawaii Farmers Union. We'll stand in our written testimony in support of the intent of this measure, but highlighting a variety of our amendments that we believe would strengthen this bill. The inclusion of food hubs and Class E loans, the insurance that there are dedicated loan categories for small and mid-sized producers, I believe is also of critical importance. We seem to be, again, confusing calories with livelihoods. Who benefits from these programs is of a critical lens by which we should measure their impact and their efficacy. For that reason, modifying smaller collateral loan requirements and ensuring, as I had said, the distribution of loan funds across a variety of sizes. We believe agriculture of various sizes is important to the state, but would push back on an aspect included in the preamble that states, that writ large is more efficient. We have a variety of smallholder operations that have found themselves durable over economic change in economic tides that has seen many large operations shutter and leave our shores. And as a result of their participation in our economy over time, it has tended to push out smaller and mid-sized operations. And so when they do end up leaving, we find ourselves more economically brittle. And without ensuring that the support that we are proposing to afford them also reaches our mid-sized operations, we risk hindering that progress ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have anybody else. Anybody on Zoom? Anybody else would like to testify on this measure? Committee, chair, questions? No questions? Okay.
I will take it from here, Vice Chair. We have our final 2 measures. Moving on to HB 1393 relating to agricultural statistics. Requires the Department of Agriculture to revitalize and enhance the agricultural statistics program to collect data on local agricultural interests. Appropriates funds. First to testify on this measure is the Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Chair. The Department of Agriculture stands on its written testimony in strong support of this measure. Mahalo.
Thank you. Next, we have Ulupono Initiative.
Thank you, Chair. Ulupono will stand on this written testimony in support.
Thank you. Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair. Hawaii Farmers Union stands on its written testimony in support.
Thank you very much. We had 7 in support and 1 with comments. Would anyone else wish to testify on HB 1393? See no other testimony. Members, questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to HB 1450, relating to agricultural climate resiliency, establishes a 3-year climate resilient food systems grant pilot program to be administered by the Department of Agriculture, requires reports to the legislature, and appropriates funds. First to testify on this measure is the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and Member Peruso. The Office of Planning and Sustainable Development supports this measure, but I'd also like to add to our testimony that within DBED, there is the Agricultural Development Corporation, and it has been focusing on creating food hubs which consolidate the high costs of the specialized equipment that support small farmers because they can't afford to invest in those for themselves. So I'd like to offer that there is an alternative approach to this as well for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Next, Hawaii Department of Agriculture.
Lord Chair, the Department of Agriculture stands in strong support of this measure.
Thank you very much. Hawaii Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Chair. The Hawaii Farm Bureau will stand on its written testimony in support.
Thank you. Hawaii Farmers Union.
Thank you, Chair. Hawaii Farmers Union stands on its written testimony in support of this measure.
Thank you. We had supportive testimony from the County of Hawaii and the Purple Mai'a Foundation, 8 total in support, and an individual as well. Would anyone else wish to testify on HB 1450? Members, questions? Seeing none, we're going to take a short recess before we do decision-making. Thank you. We're reconvening the 9:30 a.m. agenda for the Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. We are now moving to decision-making. First measure is HB 428 relating to farm to families. We're moving this measure and recommending to create a House draft to defect the date to July 1, 3000, make some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We are going to blank the appropriations. We're also going to adopt the amendment recommendations from the Department of Agriculture, indicating the volume, dollar amount, category of food purchases. They just want to tighten the language around reporting requirements. So we think that's a great idea. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on HB 428, the Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Lowen? Aye. Representative Peruso?
Aye.
Representative Quinlan? Aye. And noting Representative Ward's excused absence, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 967 relating to sustainable food systems. We want to continue to move this bill along and create a House Draft 1. We want to defect the date to July 1, 3000. We do want to make some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We want to also blank the appropriation amounts and notate them in the Standing Committee report. We want to remove the FTEs as recommended by the Hawaii Department of Agriculture and take all of their amendments as well. We also want to notate in the Standing Committee report that Haima asked to participate and would like a position if this bill were to move forward. Members, comments or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you. Voting on HB 967, the Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair voting aye. Is there any members voting no or with reservations? And noting Representative Ward's excused absence for this vote and the following votes, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 812 relating to agriculture. We want to pass with amendments, and we want to defect the date to July 1, 3000, make some technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. We do want to take the SPO's price adjustment clause as written in their testimony, except for the value amount. We want to amend the value amount from that $250 to $25,000. Also, the DOE recommendations, and with the support of the SPO, change the word shall to may. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on HB 812, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Are there any reservation or no votes, members? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 1187 relating to procurement. We would like to defect the date on this bill to July 1, 3000 and make some light technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1187, the Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Members, is there any noes or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 110 HD1 relating to local agricultural products. I'd like to move and pass this as is, but I want to notate the testimony recommendations from the Hawaii Farmers Union. We have some work to continue the conversation on this measure. Members, comments or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on HB, wait, I can't read this one. 110 HD1.
Yep.
HSCR 40. We're passing as is? Okay. Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any noes or with reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 328 HD1 relating to school meals. Recommendation is to pass as is. Members, questions, concerns? See none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Chair, voting on HB 328 HD1. Chair's recommendation is to pass as is. Members, are there any reservations or noes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 497 HD1 relating to the Hawai'i Child Nutrition Programs. We are going to create a House Draft 2 just for light technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
HB 497 HD1. The Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Members, any noes or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 773 relating to agriculture. We would like to defect the date to July 1st, 3000 on this bill. We also want to make technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. We want to blank the FTEs and notate them in the standing committee report for those two positions. We also want to note that the appropriation amount of $200,000, $100,000 for each position in the committee report as well. Members, questions or concerns? See none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 773, the Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Members, any noes or reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Moving on to HB 776 relating to agricultural support. We would like to create another House draft and defect the date to July 1, 3000, make some technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. We are gonna blank the reimbursement maximum on page 5, lines 19 in subsection C, and notate that $8,000 in the standing committee report. And we want to take Hawaii Farmers Union recommendations to add food hubs as eligible entities. And we do want to strengthen the language on the geographically disadvantaged farmer or livestock producer definition and strengthen it via the USDA's definition, just for more clarity. We also want to add an appropriation. We think that's necessary, but add a blank appropriation, and we'll let the future committees decide what that needs to look like. Members, any comments or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you. Voting on HB 776, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Members, any reservations or noes? Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to House Bill 782 relating to agriculture. We're going to defect the date to July 1, 3000, make some technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. We do want to add Hawaii Farmers Union to the list of membership entities and note in the standing committee report to add $100,000 as a recommended number for the appropriation. Members, questions or concerns? See none, Vice Chair for the vote.
All righty, voting on HB 782. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Members, any reservations or noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 968 relating to agriculture. This bill still has some work to be done. I think it's very important, and we will continue efforts to strengthen this bill and make sure that it can be equitably supported amongst all farmers and producers across the state. So we want to defect the date to July 1, 3000, make some tech amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style, blank the appropriation amount, and notate it in the standing committee report. Members, questions or concerns? See none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 968, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Members, reservations or no? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 984 relating to agricultural loans. Very important bill. Let's defect the date to July 1, 3000, and make some tech amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. We are taking Hawaii Farmers Union recommendations to include food hubs in Class E loans, to modify the intent of the language in the preamble in Section 1. There was a focus on large-scale agriculture only, and so the language we want to take from Hawaii Farmers Union's testimony states, a diverse agricultural sector that includes small and mid-sized farms is essential to Hawaii's food security, economic resilience, and self-sufficiency. Modifications to the state agricultural loan program should ensure equitable access to capital for farmers of all scales, with a focus on enabling sustainable, community-based, and diversified production, as noted line for line, word for word, in that testimony. Members, any questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 984, Chair recommendation is to pass with amendments. Members, any reservations or noes? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to HB 1393, relating to agricultural statistics. We're gonna move this bill forward, defect the date to July 1, 3000. Again, make technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Blank the appropriations and the FTEs and notate them in the standing committee report. OIP had some recommendations in their written testimony, and we are going to adopt those. And then Hawaii Food Policy Plus made one recommendation to update section 148 under collaboration. It says may collaborate, and we're gonna change the language to shall collaborate, just to strengthen the importance of working together on this measure. Members, any questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1393, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Members, anybody voting reservations or no? Chair, seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Last measure on the agenda, HB 1450, relating to agricultural climate resiliency. I recommend we defect the date to July 1, 3000 and make technical amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Blank the appropriations and notate them in the standing committee report. Members, any questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1450, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Members, any reservations or no? Seeing none, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Seeing no further business on this agenda, this hearing is adjourned. Aloha kako, welcome to the hearing for the House Committee on Agriculture and Food Systems. Today is February 7, 2025, and this is the 9:31 AM agenda. This is for decision-making only, and we are convening at the Hawaii State Capitol in room 325. This is a DM-only agenda on a short-form bill HB 92 to insert substantive provisions into the shell. There is currently no testimony on this bill. After the completion of this agenda, a public hearing will be scheduled at a later date at which testimony will then be accepted. So we are moving on to DM for HB 92. Title of the bill is relating to taxation, Chapter 235 Income Tax Law, Part 6, Returns and Payments Administration. So Hawaii Revised Statute 235-110.91, tax credit for research activities is amended by adding the following language. As used in this section, we're defining qualified high-technology business means a small business or an agricultural business that conducts more than 50% of its activities in the state in qualified research and is registered to do business in the state. We're defining qualified research shall have the same meaning as in Section 41, subsection D of the Internal Revenue Code. Qualified research expenses shall have the same meaning as in Section 41B of the Internal Revenue Code, provided that it shall not include research expenses incurred outside of the state. Small business means a company with no more than 500 employees in Hawaii. Agricultural business means a company that is primarily focused on the development and sale of agricultural products. Chair's recommendation is to pass this short form bill with an HD to recommit for future public hearings. Members, any questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Voting on HB 92, the Chair's recommendation is to pass this short form bill with HD to recommit for future public hearing. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Lowen? Aye. Representative Peruso?
Aye.
Representative Quinlan?
Aye.
And noting Representative Ward excused and absent, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Happy Aloha Friday, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.